A coffee shop in suburban Virginia, early on a Tuesday morning. A man stands at the counter talking on his phone. He has a small scar on his right forearm, just below the elbow. The man sitting 6 feet away at a corner table knows exactly how that scar got there. 3 years earlier, in a concrete basement 4,000 miles from this coffee shop, he and 3 other men from the Combat Applications Group pulled this man out of a kidnapping situation that had lasted 11 days. The operator stands up from his chair. He pays for his coffee at the register. He walks directly past the man at the counter without turning his head. He does not look up. He does not pause. This is not avoidance, and it is not cruelty. This is the rule. And the unit trains a specific protocol for what happens if that man at the counter ever looks over and makes eye contact. That protocol has a name inside the compound, and the training for it begins during the first weeks of assignment. We will get to it. First, you need to understand why a man who risked his life to save a stranger is trained to pretend that stranger does not exist. The answer begins with a single word that drives every decision inside Joint Special Operations Command. That word is confirmation. In the world of Tier 1 Special Operations, a mission does not officially exist unless someone confirms it. There are no press releases after a hostage rescue conducted by the unit. There are no medal ceremonies covered by cameras on a military installation. The classified operation remains classified for decades, sometimes permanently. The men who executed it return to a compound in North Carolina or a facility in Northern Virginia, debrief behind closed doors inside a secure room, and go back to their daily routines. But the rescued subject walking free on American soil is a loose thread. Not because that person did anything wrong. The problem is what that person now represents inside the intelligence picture. If an operator walks up to a rescued hostage in a grocery store in Arlington, Virginia, and shakes his hand, that handshake is confirmation. It confirms that a specific individual was rescued by a specific military unit on a specific date in a specific country. That single moment of human connection in the produce aisle creates a witness. And a witness can be questioned by a journalist at their front door, photographed by a foreign surveillance team outside a restaurant, subpoenaed by a congressional committee in Washington, or threatened by the same criminal network that conducted the original kidnapping overseas. The foreign intelligence calculus is straightforward. If a hostile service identifies the rescued subject, they can work backward through every relationship that person maintains. They photograph him at a dinner in Georgetown. They track the people he meets. They look for the man who seems to know him a little too well, in a way that has no civilian explanation. That man becomes the operator. And once you identify the operator, you can identify the unit. Once you identify the unit, you can map the mission. Once you map the mission, you have the method, the insertion route, the staging area. And once you have the method, future hostages die because the enemy adapted. So the rule inside the compound is absolute. No contact with rescue subjects after the mission ends. Not a phone call from a private number. Not a handwritten letter through a third party. Not a nod across a parking lot in McLean, Virginia on a Saturday afternoon. The rescued subjects learn about this rule during the post-mission debrief. Within hours of extraction, sometimes while still at a forward operating base with dust on their clothes or a safe house in a foreign capital with blacked-out windows, a military intelligence officer sits across from the rescued individual at a metal table and delivers a short, clinical explanation. You were recovered by a United States military unit. You will not be told the name of the unit. You will not be shown photographs of the personnel. You will not be given the names, ranks, or service branches of the individuals involved. If you are approached at any point in the future by anyone claiming to be part of the rescue team, you are instructed to report that contact immediately to the State Department or the Defense Intelligence Agency. Most subjects accept these terms without argument. They are alive. They are going home to their families. The details of who carried them out of a concrete room at 2 a.m. feel secondary in that moment, sitting on a cot in a windowless room, wearing borrowed clothes, drinking water from a plastic bottle for the first time in days or weeks. But some of them carry the unanswered question with them for years after they walk back into their old lives. There are reported cases of former hostages who hired private investigators to try to identify the men who pulled them out of captivity. One former aid worker, recovered from a cell in a North African country in the early 2000s, reportedly spent over $40,000 across 5 years trying to track down the team that extracted her from that building. She filed Freedom of Information Act requests with the Department of Defense. She contacted veterans organizations at military bases across the Southeast. She wrote letters to the Pentagon addressed to offices that officially do not exist on any public directory. Every avenue led to the same dead end, the same rubber-stamped response from a government clerk. Classified, no records available, personnel information permanently redacted. She was not trying to expose anyone. She was not writing a book or selling a story to a magazine. She wanted to find the men who saved her life and say 2 words to their faces. The system was designed to make sure she never could. Another case involved a defense contractor kidnapped in a Middle Eastern country and recovered during a nighttime raid by operators from 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta. After returning to the United States and settling back into his home near a military installation in the Southeast, he told a journalist that the only thing he remembered about the rescue itself was a voice in the darkness saying, "We've got you," and then strong hands pulling him through a doorway into cold night air. He said he would recognize that voice anywhere on earth, and he would give anything to find the man behind it. He never did. The voice belongs to someone who will never identify himself, by regulation and by personal conviction. Pay attention to this next detail, because it explains the full weight of what these men accepted. The operators know all of this. They know the people they save will carry that unanswered question, sometimes for the rest of their lives. And the men inside the unit carry their own version of the weight, one that rarely gets discussed even among themselves inside the team room. A retired operator, speaking under conditions of anonymity in a published interview years after leaving the unit, described seeing a family Christmas photograph pinned to a corkboard on the wall of the State Department office during an unrelated intelligence briefing in Washington. He recognized the family instantly. The father in the photograph was a man he had carried over his shoulder out of a collapsing structure during a rescue operation 2 years prior in a country he is still not permitted to name. The children in the photograph, a boy in a red sweater and a girl holding a stuffed animal, had no idea their father was alive because of the man standing 6 feet from their picture in a government hallway. The operator said nothing to anyone in the room. He looked at the photograph for less than 3 seconds, turned away, and continued walking down the corridor as if he had never seen it. Another operator described finding a wedding announcement online for a woman he had helped extract from a hostage situation in Southeast Asia. She was smiling in the photograph on his laptop screen, standing next to a man in a dark suit on a stone terrace surrounded by flowers. The operator read the first 2 lines of the announcement. He closed the browser tab and never searched her name again. He told an interviewer years later that he was glad she looked happy, and that was enough. A third account, less widely cited but referenced in a book written by a former intelligence officer who worked alongside the unit, describes an operator who encountered a former rescue subject at a gas station outside Fort Bragg. The man was filling his truck at the next pump. The operator recognized him immediately from a mission in South America. The rescued man looked directly at the operator, paused, and said nothing. It was unclear whether the man recognized the operator or was simply making idle eye contact with a stranger. The operator finished fueling his vehicle, drove away, and reported the encounter to his team sergeant that same afternoon. These men understand the transaction they accepted when they walked through the compound gate for the first time. The rescue is the gift. The silence is the price of keeping that gift intact for the next person who needs it. You do not get to be thanked. You do not get to see the gratitude in their eyes across a dinner table. You do not get to hear the words that the person you saved has been rehearsing in their head for months or years. That absence is built into the job description at the unit, and every operator who passes selection knows it before he ever sets foot on a target building overseas. If you are watching this, and it is changing how you think about what these men actually sacrifice beyond the physical danger, hit subscribe. This channel covers the parts of Tier 1 special operations that never make the official record and never will. There is more to this story, and it gets heavier from here. Remember the encounter protocol mentioned at the beginning of this video, the one with a name inside the compound. Here is how it works. Inside the unit's training facility, operators rehearse a specific scripted response for the scenario where a former rescue subject recognizes them or attempts to make contact in a public setting. This protocol has been referenced in multiple accounts from retired personnel who served at the unit across different decades, though the exact internal terminology remains classified. The training scenario works like this. If an operator is in a civilian environment, a restaurant in Northern Virginia, an airport terminal at Dulles, a hardware store near a military installation, and a former rescue subject approaches and says something like, "I think I know you," or "Were you in the military overseas?" The operator has a rehearsed, neutral response ready before the sentence is even finished. The response is designed to shut down the conversation without creating suspicion, hostility, or a memorable interaction. The standard version, according to multiple published accounts from former unit personnel, is something close to, "I think you have me confused with someone else." Delivered flat, with no warmth in the voice and no recognition in the eyes, the eye contact breaks within a second, already drifting toward the exit. If the subject presses further, the operator moves to the pre-trained alibi. Every operator at the unit maintains a cover identity for domestic civilian use, a job title that explains the travel schedule, a company name that checks out under a basic internet search, a plausible explanation for their physical fitness, their scars, and their irregular hours, government contractor, defense logistics consultant, security systems analyst for a beltway firm. The alibi is rehearsed until it sounds bored, because bored is believable in a conversation between strangers. If the subject still does not disengage, the operator executes the final step, removal from the location. Walk to the parking lot at a normal pace, get into the vehicle and drive away without circling back. Do not return to the same establishment for a set period. Multiple accounts reference an additional protocol for reporting the encounter to the unit's counterintelligence section, which then monitors the rescue subject for any follow-up activity. The entire sequence, from first unexpected eye contact to vehicle departure, is designed to last less than 90 seconds. The operator treats it the way a pilot treats an engine failure on takeoff, not with emotion, with a checklist rehearsed so many times it runs on reflex. And despite all of this training inside the compound, in rare cases across the unit's history, the rule broke. There are at least 2 well-documented instances where an operator from the Combat Applications Group made unauthorized post-mission contact with a rescue subject. The details remain partially classified, but the institutional response in each case was severe. In one reported incident, an operator exchanged a brief conversation with a former hostage at a private social event in the Virginia suburbs. The encounter lasted less than 5 minutes. A third party who witnessed the interaction reported it to a unit liaison. The operator received a formal reprimand in his classified service record and was temporarily removed from operational status. His team leader was also disciplined because the unit holds leadership accountable for the conduct of their men on and off duty. In the second case, a rescue subject located a specific operator through a mutual acquaintance in the defense community and arranged a private meeting at a restaurant. The operator agreed. When the encounter was discovered through a counterintelligence review, the operator was pulled from the unit permanently and reassigned to a conventional Army post. Not because the conversation constituted a direct security breach. The intelligence assessment concluded that the rescue subject posed low risk. But the precedent was the real threat. If one operator meets one rescue subject over a steak dinner, the wall develops a crack. And walls inside this community do not crack partially. They collapse entirely, because every exception becomes the justification for the next one. The institutional logic is not about retribution. It is about the next rescue that has not happened yet. Every time a future hostage is pulled from a cell or a vehicle trunk or a building in a country the United States will never acknowledge operating inside, the safety of that extraction depends on the chain of silence holding firm. Every operator who walks past a familiar face in a coffee shop without flinching is reinforcing that chain. Every operator who breaks it, even with the best of intentions over a quiet handshake, weakens the protection for the next person sitting alone in the dark overseas, waiting for a voice that says, "We've got you." The unit does not treat the silence as withholding credit from the men who earned it. They treat the silence as the final phase of the operation itself. The rescue does not end when the helicopter crosses into friendly airspace over a dark border. The rescue does not end when the subject lands on American soil at a military airfield and sees their family waiting on the tarmac. The rescue ends when an operator walks past a man with a familiar scar at a coffee counter in suburban Virginia 36 months later and does not say a single word. The gift is the extraction, the gratitude is a security risk the unit does not accept, and the silence is the favor they never stop performing for people who will never know it is being done. Some people will watch this and call it cold, maybe even cruel. Others will recognize that the men who do this work gave up the right to be recognized the day they reported to the compound and signed paperwork that erased their names from every record the public will ever see. The question worth debating is whether a country that asks this level of silence from its best operators owes them something it can never publicly give. Drop your answer in the comments. If this changed how you see what these men carry home from missions that officially never happened, click the video on screen now. It goes deeper into the cost of Tier 1 service that the recruiting posters will never show you.